After I collapsed during a staff presentation, the paramedic said, "We tried every number." No answer. No one came. But that night, my sister tagged me in a photo, celebrating family without the drama. I did not comment. 4 days later, still on IV, my phone lit up. 73 missed calls, and a text from my dad. "Pick up. This is bigger than you realize. It's serious." I did. And then, before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment. Have you ever felt like you were the only one holding your world together? Let me know where you're watching from. I sat there in the silence of the emergency room. The beep of the cardiac monitor, the only proof that I was still alive. The paramedic's words echoed in my head like a gavel strike. We tried every number. My dad, my mom, my sister. Not one of them had picked up. I pictured my phone buzzing on a table somewhere. Maybe next to a glass of wine. Maybe next to a plate of pasta. Ignored. Or worse, silenced. I reached for my phone on the bedside table. My hand was shaking, the IV line tugging at my skin. I opened Instagram. It was muscle memory at this point, a masochistic need to know. And there it was. A photo posted 3 hours ago. My sister, Michelle, raising a glass of red wine. My dad, David, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. My mom, Sarah, looking tired but content. They were at the bistro. Our bistro. The one I paid the mortgage on. The caption hit me harder than the floor had when I collapsed. Celebrating family without the drama. The drama. That was me. I was the drama. I was the one who worked 80 hours a week. I was the one who missed Sunday dinners because I was closing deals that paid for their health insurance. I was the storm they were sheltering from. I stared at the screen until the backlight dimmed and went black. I didn't weep. I didn't draft a manifesto in the comments. I felt a cold, clinical detachment settle over me, like the anesthesia before a surgery. If I was the drama, I would remove myself from the stage. I put the phone down. I closed my eyes. And for the next 4 days, I didn't speak to anyone. I lay in that hospital bed, letting the silence wash over me. It wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. It was the sound of a life that had become entirely transactional. I had bought my place in this family with checks and wire transfers, and the moment I stopped paying, the moment I needed them, my subscription had expired. Then came the 4th day. The day the silence broke. My phone, which I had finally unmuted, began to vibrate. Once. Twice. Then continuously. It danced across the hard plastic of the tray table. I watched the screen light up with names I used to associate with safety. Dad. Mom. Michelle. Dad again. Michelle again. 73 missed calls in under an hour. It felt manic. It felt like panic. But I didn't feel panic. I felt a strange, cold curiosity. What did they want now? Had the bistro's refrigerator broken? Did Mom need a copay for her blood pressure medication? Was there a legal issue with the liquor license? It was always something. It was never just me. Then the text came through. Pick up. This is bigger than you realize. It's serious. I looked at those words. Bigger than you realize. What could be bigger than your daughter waking up alone in an ER with partial paralysis in her left arm? What could be bigger than the realization that your family celebrated your absence? I picked up the phone. I didn't say hello. I just listened. And the sound I heard on the other end wasn't anger. It wasn't a demand for money. It was a sound I had never heard my father make in my entire life. He was weeping. To understand why the silence in that hospital room was so loud, you have to understand the noise that came before it. You have to understand the glass cage I had built for myself. Let's rewind 48 hours. It was a Tuesday in late February. Chicago. The kind of winter day where the wind screams against the windows and the cold seeps through the double-paned glass of the 42nd floor. I was a junior partner at Sterling and Hart, and I was 72 hours into a sleepless sprint to close the Vanguard merger. $18 million. That was the settlement figure sitting on my desk. That was the price tag on my sanity. I stood by the window, looking down at the gray grid of the city. My reflection ghosted against the glass-sharp suit. Perfect hair, hollow eyes. I took a sip of espresso. It was my fourth one since midnight. My left hand was tingling. A pins and needles sensation that had started in my fingertips and was slowly creeping up my forearm. I shook it out. I ignored it. Ignoring pain was part of the job description. People looked at my life, the corner office, the German car, the designer heels, and they saw greed. They saw a woman obsessed with status. But they were looking at the surface. They didn't see the architecture underneath. Psychologists call it hyper-independence. It is not just ambition, it is a trauma response. It is a survival mechanism, forged in the fires of feeling unsafe. Somewhere along the line, I had convinced myself that if I was the most useful person in the room, I could never be abandoned. If I was the one writing the checks, I would never be the one left waiting for a handout. I had built an armor of $18 million contracts to keep the loneliness out. I didn't realize that armor was also keeping the love out. My phone buzzed on the mahogany desk. It wasn't a text. It was a banking notification. The automatic transfer had gone through. $2,800. The monthly mortgage payment for the hearth, my family's bistro back in the suburbs. I stared at the number. For 3 years, I had paid that mortgage. When my dad retired from the fire department with a bad back and a shrinking pension, I stepped in. When the bistro needed a new industrial oven, I wired the cash within the hour. When my sister, Michelle, needed to cover payroll during the slow season, I was the silent investor who made the deficit disappear. I was the infrastructure of their lives. I kept the lights on. I kept the roof over their heads, but I wasn't part of the warmth inside. I pictured them at the bistro right now. The smell of garlic and rosemary. The sound of clinking glasses. My dad telling stories about the old firehouse days. Michelle laughing in that loud, unself-conscious way she had. They were warm, they were together, and I was here, in the cold, paying for the privilege of their comfort while I starved for their attention. It felt transactional. I was the utility company. You don't invite the utility company to dinner, you just hope they keep the power running. The numbness in my arm jumped to my shoulder. A sharp spike of pressure bloomed behind my right eye, the aura of a migraine I didn't have time for. I blinked, trying to clear the static from my vision. I had a closing argument to prep. I had partners to impress. I had to be useful. I sat back down at my desk. I typed 3 words. Settlement terms accepted. And then the room tilted. The high-pitched whine of the computer fan suddenly sounded like a jet engine. The floor rushed up to meet me. I didn't have time to be scared. I just had time for one final, ridiculous thought. I hope I saved the document. Then, the lights went out. The white ceiling of the hospital room was textured with tiny, mocking bumps. I counted them. 142 in the square directly above my head. It was easier than looking at the IV bag dripping fluid into my arm. It was easier than looking at my phone. The doctor, a young neurologist with tired eyes, had called it a transient ischemic attack, a thanks in advance. A warning stroke. He used words like ischemia and vascular stress, but what he meant was that my brain had short-circuited because I refused to let it rest. "You're 32, he said, flipping through my chart. Observation. That meant lying still. That meant silence. That meant facing the fact that in the 4 hours since I had been admitted, my phone had remained perfectly, devastatingly quiet. I picked it up again. I unlocked it, and there it was again, the photo. I zoomed in. I dissected it like it was a contract with hidden clauses. I looked at the way my dad was leaning toward my mom, protective and solid. I looked at Michelle's smile wide, genuine, unguarded. They looked relieved. That was the only word for it. There was a lightness in their posture that I hadn't seen in years. And then the caption. Celebrating family without the drama. The drama. I let the word roll around in my head. Was that what my ambition was to them? Drama? Was my exhaustion? My stress? My constant need to achieve, was that just noise that interrupted their peace? I thought about the last time I saw them. Christmas. I had arrived late, on a conference call. I had spent the entire dinner checking emails under the table. When Michelle tried to tell me about a new recipe she was trying at the bistro, I had interrupted her to take a call from a client in Hong Kong. I remembered the look on her face. Not anger, just resignation. Like she expected it, I was the drama. A cold, hard resolve settled in my chest, displacing the fear. If they wanted a life without me, without my drama, without the complications I brought, then I would give it to them. I opened my settings. I scrolled to Do Not Disturb. I turned it on. Then I went to my contacts. Dad, Mom, Michelle. I didn't block them, that would be dramatic. I just muted their notifications. I silenced them the way they had silenced me. I sat up. The room spun for a second, then steadied. I pulled the IV tape off my hand. It stung. A sharp, grounding pain. "What are you doing?" a nurse asked from the doorway, her eyes widening. "I'm leaving," I said. My voice was raspy but steady. "You can't leave. The doctor hasn't cleared you. You had a stroke event." "I'm signing out AMA," I said, swinging my legs over the side of the bed. AMA. Against medical advice. It sounded like a corporate acronym. I have work to do. "Ma'am, please. You need rest. You need someone to pick you up." "I don't have anyone to pick me up," I said. I stood up. The floor was cold against my bare feet. I felt a wave of dizziness, but I locked my knees and forced it down. "I'll call a car." I pulled on the wrinkled suit Trevor, my paralegal, had brought me. Buttoning the blouse felt like armoring up for combat. I walked out of that hospital without looking back. I didn't call my dad. I didn't text my mom. I didn't comment on Michelle's photo. I was done being the ATM. I was done being the savior who wasn't worth a seat at the table. If I was an island, I would be a fortress. I got into the Uber. "Where to?" the driver asked. I didn't say home. Home was empty. "Sterling and Hart," I said. "Downtown." The merger wasn't going to close itself. And right now, $18 million felt like the only thing in the world that wouldn't let me down. The automatic doors of Sterling and Hart slid open, and the rush of conditioned air hit me like a familiar drug. Cold. Sterile. Safe. It was 7:30 in the morning. I had been out of the hospital for less than an hour. My head was pounding with a rhythm that matched my heartbeat, a dull, persistent thud behind my eyes that warned me I was walking a razor's edge. But I ignored it. I walked past the reception desk, my heels clicking on the marble floor, a sound of authority, of purpose. "Morning, Miss Hart," the security guard nodded. He didn't ask why I looked pale. He didn't ask why I was wearing the same suit as yesterday. He just saw the badge and the stride. I took the elevator up. 42 floors. 42 seconds to compose myself. I checked my reflection in the polished steel doors. I looked tired, yes, but I also looked sharp, dangerous. I looked like someone who was about to close the biggest deal of her career. When I walked into the conference room, the air shifted. Peter, the managing partner, looked up from his tablet. Justin, my paralegal, stopped mid-sentence. "Sydney?" Peter frowned, checking his watch. "We heard. There was a medical incident. Are you all right?" "I'm fine," I said, setting my briefcase on the table. The lie tasted metallic. "Just a migraine. Let's get this done." We spent the next 6 hours in a war of attrition with the opposing counsel. I paced the room, dismantling their arguments one by one. I used my exhaustion as a weapon, channeling every ounce of frustration, every bit of hurt from that Instagram photo into my negotiation. I was ruthless. I was brilliant. By 2 in the afternoon, the papers were signed. The Vanguard merger was closed. $18 million in settlement fees secured for the firm. Peter clapped me on the shoulder. "Incredible work, Sydney. Truly, you're a machine." "Thank you," I said. He smiled, already checking his phone. "Take the afternoon off. You earned it." He didn't ask if I was okay, He didn't ask about the medical incident. He just celebrated the win and moved on to his next meeting. I walked back to my office and closed the door. The silence was absolute. I looked at the signed contract on my desk. $18 million. It was a number so large it felt abstract. It meant bonuses. It meant prestige. It meant I had won. But as I stood there, looking out at the city skyline, the victory felt hollow. It felt like ash in my mouth. I had discharged myself from a hospital against medical advice for this. I had risked my health, my life, for this. And now that it was done, there was no one to call, no one to share it with. I thought about calling my dad. "Hey, Dad." I closed the big one. I could hear his voice in my head, proud but distant. "That's great, honey. But you sound tired." No, I couldn't call him. I had muted him. I had muted all of them. I left the office early. I took a cab back to my apartment. It was a beautiful space, high ceilings, modern art, a view of the lake that cost a fortune. I walked in and kicked off my heels. The silence here was different than the office. It was lonely. I poured myself a glass of water and sat on my beige Italian sofa. It looked like a place where no one actually lived. "I am an island," I whispered to the empty room. I had said it before as a mantra of strength. Now, it sounded like a diagnosis. I had won the game of capitalism. I had the career, the money, the independence. But I had lost the game of life. I had no one to eat dinner with. I had no one to ask how my day was. I was safe in my fortress, protected by my achievements, and I had never been more alone. My phone sat on the coffee table, screen dark. I stared at it, daring it to light up, daring them to care enough to break through my silence. But it stayed dark. And that silence was louder than any scream. 4 days. That's how long I kept the notifications off. 4 days of waking up, going to work, coming home, and staring at the city lights. I told myself it was peace. I told myself it was boundaries. But deep down, I knew it was punishment for them, and for me. On the 4th night, I couldn't take it anymore. The silence had metastasized from a shield into a prison. I sat on my couch with a glass of wine. My hand hovered over the settings icon. I took a breath, steeling myself for the anger, the guilt trips, the demands. I was ready to fight. I was ready to tell them exactly why I had walked away. I toggled Do Not Disturb off. The phone didn't just buzz, it convulsed. It was like a dam breaking. The notifications cascaded down the screen so fast I couldn't read them. Missed call. Dad, 14. Missed call. Mom, 22. Missed call. Michelle, 37. 73 missed calls. My stomach dropped. This wasn't where is the mortgage check? Energy. This wasn't why didn't you like my post? Energy. This was panic. Then the text from my dad appeared at the top of the stack. Sent 20 minutes ago. Pick up. This is bigger than you realize. It's serious. I stared at the words. Bigger than you realize. Anger flared hot and bright in my chest. What could possibly be bigger than my medical emergency, than my stroke scare, than the fact that I had almost died trying to secure their financial future? How dare they? How dare they demand my attention now, after ignoring me when I was vulnerable? I pressed the call button. My finger hit the glass hard. I was ready to scream. I was ready to burn the bridge down. Hello? My dad's voice stopped me cold. It was ragged, broken. He wasn't yelling, he was weeping. Dad? The anger evaporated, replaced by a cold dread. What's going on? Sydney, he choked out. Oh God, Sydney, where have you been? I've been... It's your mother, he said. She has leukemia, AML, acute myeloid leukemia. The world stopped. The glass walls of my apartment seemed to dissolve. What? The word was a whisper. No, that's not. She was fine. I saw the photo. You were celebrating. We weren't celebrating. He sobbed. That wasn't a party, Sydney. That was the hospital cafeteria. The storm. Michelle posted about. It wasn't drama. It was the first round of chemo. It was aggressive. We thought we were going to lose her that night. When she made it through, we raised a glass of water because she was still alive. I felt the blood drain from my face. My knees gave out, and I sank back onto the sofa. The photo, the smiles, the relief I had seen on their faces, it wasn't relief that I was gone. It was relief that she was still here. Why didn't you tell me? I whispered. Why didn't you call? Because you told us not to, he said, his voice thick with a pain that wasn't anger, but regret. You sent that email on Monday. Do not interrupt me this week. I am handling the merger of the decade. No family drama. We were terrified, Sydney. We thought if we told you, if we distracted you, you might lose the deal. Or worse, the stress. He took a jagged breath. We knew how hard you were working. We wanted to protect you. We thought we could hold it together until your deadline passed. The phone slipped from my hand onto the cushion. I had built a fortress to keep them out, and they had respected it. They had respected my ambitions so much that they had suffered in silence to protect it. The silence I had interpreted as abandonment was actually the loudest act of love they could have possibly performed. And I had punished them for it. I grabbed the phone. I'm coming, I said. I'm coming home. I ran to the door, leaving the wine, the apartment, the $18 million contract behind. None of it mattered. The only thing that mattered was the 4-hour drive between me and the family I had so terribly, tragically misunderstood. The drive to the suburbs usually took 45 minutes. Tonight, it felt like a voyage across an ocean. The highway was a blur of taillights and rain, the rhythmic slap of the windshield wipers marking time. Every minute felt like an hour lost. Every mile felt like an accusation. I parked my German car next to my dad's beat-up truck in the hospital parking lot. The contrast made me nauseous. My success, parked next to his sacrifice. I ran through the sliding doors, ignoring the security guard's glance at my disheveled appearance. I found the oncology ward. Room 412. My dad was standing in the hallway, leaning against the wall as if it were the only thing holding him upright. He looked older than I remembered. Smaller, his fire chief's shoulders, usually so broad, were slumped. Dad, I breathed. He looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face etched with exhaustion. But when he saw me, there was no anger. There was only relief. Sydney, he whispered. He pulled me into a hug that smelled like antiseptic and old coffee. He held me tight, like he was afraid I would disappear again. You're here. I'm so sorry, I sobbed into his shoulder. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I know, he said, stroking my hair. We didn't want you to know. Not like this. I pulled back, looking at him. Why didn't you just call me? I don't care about the merger. I don't care about the money. I care about Mom. He looked away, his jaw working. I tried. Sydney. What? I tried to tell you. 3 days ago. I stared at him. You didn't call. I checked my logs. I didn't call, he said quietly. I drove to your office. The world tilted again. You came to Chicago? Tuesday night. After Mom got through the worst of the chemo reaction, she stabilized, and I knew I couldn't keep it from you anymore. So I drove up. I got there around 4 in the morning. 4 in the morning? I parked outside your building. I saw the lights on the 42nd floor. I knew it was you. He took a deep breath, his voice trembling. I walked into the lobby. I told the security guard I was your father. He let me up. I stood outside the glass wall of your office. I remembered that night. I remembered the exhaustion. I remembered passing out at my desk for an hour before the sun came up. I saw you, he whispered. You were asleep under your desk. You had your suit jacket over you like a blanket. You looked so small, so tired. You had dark circles under your eyes that looked like bruises. He wiped a tear from his cheek. I had my hand on the door handle. I was going to walk in there and tell you that your mother might be dying. But then I looked at you, sleeping there, trying so hard to be strong, trying so hard to win that case, and I just couldn't do it. Dad, I couldn't be the one to break you, Sydney. You were holding on by a thread. I could see it. If I woke you up and dropped this on you, I was afraid you would shatter, so I let go of the handle. I stood there for 10 minutes, just watching you sleep, praying for you. And then I turned around and drove home. He looked at me, his eyes full of a terrible, beautiful love. The hardest thing a parent can do is let their child walk into a burning building because they think it's a playground, he said, his voice cracking. We knew how much this merger meant to you. We swallowed our fear so you wouldn't have to taste it. I fell apart then. I collapsed into his arms, weeping for the silence I had misinterpreted, for the love I had been too blind to see. He hadn't abandoned me. He had stood guard over me while I slept, carrying the weight of the world so I could rest for just one more hour. He wasn't absent. He was the unseen protector, and I had muted him. I love you, Dad, I choked out. I love you so much. I know, baby, he said, holding me tighter. I know. Now come on. Your mother is waiting for you. He opened the door to room 412. And for the first time in years, I walked through a door not as a lawyer, not as a partner, but as a daughter coming home. The room was dim, lit only by the monitors and a small bedside lamp. My mom, Sarah, looked so small in the bed. The woman who had carried me, fed me, and patched up my knees was now covered in wires and tubes. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, but her eyes, those warm, brown eyes, were the same. Michelle was sitting on the other side of the bed, holding Mom's hand. When she saw me, her face crumpled. "Sydney," she whispered. She stood up and walked around the bed. We hugged, awkward at first, then desperate. We hadn't hugged in years. Not really. Not like this. "I'm sorry." Michelle sobbed into my shoulder. The caption, "I didn't mean it like that. I swear. I was just so relieved she was okay. I didn't realize. I didn't think." "I know," I said, holding her tighter. "I know." I pulled away and walked to the bed. My mom smiled, weak but radiant. "There she is," she whispered. "My big shot lawyer." "Hi, Mom," I said, taking her hand. It felt fragile, like bird bones. "I'm here." "I told your father not to call you," she scolded gently. "You have important work." "Nothing is more important than this," I said. "Nothing." I looked around the room. My dad stood by the door, watching us, his face a map of relief and exhaustion. Michelle was wiping her eyes. And my mom was here, alive, fighting. The $18 million I had won yesterday felt like monopoly money. The prestige, the title, the corner office, it all felt like dust. I thought about the empty chair in my apartment. I thought about the empty chair at my desk. You can own the biggest table in the city, but if every chair around it is empty, you aren't successful, you're just alone. Don't wait for a hospital bed to realize that the most expensive currency on earth isn't money. It's presence. I took a deep breath. "I'm taking a leave of absence," I said. My dad's head snapped up. "Sydney, you don't have to." "I want to," I said. "I have enough money. I have enough success. What I don't have is enough time." I sat down in the chair next to the bed. I didn't check my phone. I didn't think about the merger. I just held my mother's hand and listened to the steady rhythm of her breathing. I had spent my life building a fortress to keep the world out. Now, I was finally letting the world back in. And for the first time in a long time, the silence wasn't lonely. It was full. Success isn't what you hold in your hands. It's who you hold in your heart. If this story reminded you to make that call today, please like and share. You never know who needs to hear this.